The individuals reported seeing a strange glowing object in the forest. We're talking the Rendlesham Forest Incident. Hit it. It was 1980. The Iran-Iraq War began. VHS home movie cameras averaged $1,599, and some U.S. Air Force patrolmen ran into some unexpected visitors. I'm your host, Jerry D., with another episode of Totally Rad Christmas, the podcast that talks all things Christmas in the 80s. Toys, movies, specials, music, and fads. If it was gnarly during Christmas in the 80s, we got it covered. Now, joining me is a very special guest. You'll know him as one of the hosts of the Canadian Spirit podcast. It's Kelly McMillan. Kelly, how's it going?
Not too bad, Jerry. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for coming on. I've been, ever since we both joined the Illumipati, I've been trying to find a way to do some sort of cool paranormal something to, that's not quite in my wheelhouse to invite you on, because I really enjoy your show. I really enjoyed your interview with the Bigfoot witness.
Yeah, that was certainly an interesting one. I didn't really expect it to take that kind of a direction. I don't know how explicit I can get on this podcast, but there were certain aspects of his anatomy that were mentioned that, it certainly got interesting.
It really did, yes. But you're part of the Spirit Institute, right?
Yeah, it's the Supernatural Paranormal Investigations and Research Institute. When you break it all down, it adds up to the acronym. Spirit. So
yeah. And how long have you been part of that?
Darcy and I, we founded that back in 2011, so 10 years now.
Wow, that's cool. And your podcast is it's still relatively new, but because you don't have like a ton of episodes, but all your episodes are very interesting.
It's a bi-weekly podcast, so we put one out every 2 weeks. Right now, while we're recording anyway, we're on season break, so we did 20 episodes in our first season. We're just taking a break right now, figuring out exactly what direction we're taking the show in. And
you had quite a range of topics as well.
Yeah, definitely. When we first started doing the podcast, we got looking into Canadian history and things like that as far as paranormal events go, and there were really some interesting bits and pieces in our country's history that neither Darcy or I had any idea about. Like, for example, the Great Werewolf Panic in Quebec City in the 1700s.
Yeah, you hear something like that, and it makes you laugh, but at the same time, you can kind of see how someone would be afraid of something like that, especially in that area where I imagine there's lots of woods and forests and things of that nature. I'm in Texas, and so there's a lot of like just flat land. It's a lot of like brush, cactus, and so it's hard for me to picture sometimes forests because I've never really been in like a forest. So even though we have a ranch, and I've been on our ranch and there's tons of trees, it's completely different animal. So I can see how something like that, especially when you think of pop culture nowadays, could be a little bit more scary and spooky and eerie than just a little desert, with brush and cactus all around. Great werewolf scare. Yeah. I mean, I can imagine how just the whole area there in Canada would be just rife with all sorts of scary stories and things of that nature, just because of some of the environment.
Yeah. Not only just that, but also the indigenous folklore is absolutely rife with spirit stories, with ghost stories, cryptids, monsters. It's just absolutely rich with that kind of thing. And when you really drill down on some of them, you can actually link them back to, say, for example, natural disasters.
Like earthquakes or...
One really good one that comes to mind is the Haida tribe, which is out on British Columbia's west coast. They have this story where the Thunderbird... I guess it's a Thunderbird. It's not exactly, they don't call it that, but it's the closest approximation that I can give you. That's something familiar.
Gotcha.
Well, anyway, this Thunderbird is mortal enemies with the whale, and they're constantly in this sky ocean battle with one another. But one day, the Thunderbird sweeps down out of the sky, grabs the whale, picks it up, and drops it on the land. Well, with the whale being an ocean creature and whatnot, being enormous in size, it creates an enormous earthquake, and then the ocean comes to reclaim the whale, or the whale calls to the ocean, and the ocean comes to get it. Well, fast forward about 3,000 years or so, geologists started using these legends, and they started realizing it's not just the Haida who have this legend, it's all the way down the west coast of North America. And that's initially how they found out that the Cascadia megafault exists off the west coast of North America. So
That's cool. I see, and I love stuff like that. That's so interesting to me. There, especially mythology in general. I've been a huge fan of Greek, Roman, and of course Egyptian and lately Norse mythology. It's just I've always been fascinated by stories of how certain things exist and why certain natural phenomena do certain things, and just the way that people interpreted it in ancient civilizations. So to me, that's amazing. It's almost like, I mean, it's just kind of like Zeus and Poseidon, the brothers that got along but also didn't really get along. I mean, it's kind of that similar thing, the sky and the ocean just warring against each other. So all that is just fascinating. But we're not here to talk about that. We're actually here to talk about UFOs tonight.
Indeed we are. One of my favorite topics.
Mine too, but probably for different reasons. I can talk about ET and the Predator all day long, but I don't know if I could talk just general UFO sightings all day long. I just don't have the knowledge on it. When I was trying to find something that happened in the 80s that I could bring you on for, all of a sudden this popped up. And you'll forgive my poor South Texas pronunciations of the various names, but I believe it's Rendlesham. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Rendlesham.
Okay, yeah. So this is it was an incident that occurred on December 26th at around 2 to 3 a.m. And it just really kind of took off nationally. And then eventually internationally. It was just one of those big unsolved mysteries. In fact, I think it even aired on Unsolved Mysteries in the early 90s, like 91, something like that.
Yeah, it did so.
Yeah, and so of course, it's still unsolved, and one of the parties involved still claims that he saw, and he's adamant that he has new evidence about some extraterrestrials and things of that nature. But a lot of people write it off as a hoax, as a lot of them do for these UFO type things. What's your stance in general on UFOs?
As far as UFOs go, I have a bit of a controversial stance. I get in trouble a lot with UFO Twitter in regards to some of my stances, because those people, they're out of their minds. They tend to think that the government, well, their stance is that the government knows about UFOs. Mm-hmm. They keep them covered up. And, they know exactly what they are. They've reverse engineered the craft, and they're going to create Project Bluebeam, and they're going to stage an alien takeover of the world. No. I don't think that. My personal thoughts on it is that legitimately, they don't know. And I'll tell you why. Because if the government did know what these UFOs are, if they had a crashed craft recovered and they were able to reverse engineer it, wouldn't it then be better for national security to come forward and say, hey, yeah, there are alien spacecraft, we have one, we know what it's capable of, we know how to defend against it, or sitting back and saying, oh, no, we don't know anything, we don't know a thing, nope. Which one breeds more confidence in your government or your ruling class?
And to my mind, definitely the first one.
Yeah, so if they really did know what these things are, it would be more beneficial for them to come out and just say it. So my stance is that genuinely they don't know what these things are, and really until the last couple of years they haven't really been taking them all that seriously either.
Right. So you weren't going to storm Area 51 then?
No.
Okay.
I spent a couple of months out in the desert. It did not agree with me, so I'm okay with not going back.
I understand. Yeah. So I am generally, I like to believe in things. I mean, of course, I run a Christmas podcast, so I'm definitely more of a believer. But it's just one of those that I don't know if a lot of these unexplained events really are unexplained. I believe a lot of them could be very well explained through natural phenomena. Not that
Hmm.
there's not UFOs out there, not that there isn't, intelligent life out there. I really think that a lot of these, especially the ones that I've briefly looked at, seems like could very well just be explained naturally.
And I agree 100%.
Yeah.
If I could
Yeah.
interject for a second here,
Yeah, go for
because
it.
we've done a couple of UFO sightings. Well, generally, I'm the one who does them. My co host on Canadian Spirit, Darcy, he's the guy who founded Spirit. But
Hmm.
whenever there's a UFO call, he's just like, okay, Kelly, just take it, go. I don't know anything about any of this. So, but yeah, for the most part, in the area where I live up here in Canada,
Hmm.
I have yet to receive one UFO case that I can't rule out with natural or man made phenomena.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that seems to be at least the general not characteristic, but what I've noticed, I should say, a common thread for most of them. Again, I'm not ruling it out at all. I just it
No, certainly not.
Yeah, it just seems like, at least for the most part, a lot of these can be explained naturally.
Yeah. And it's not to say that the witnesses or anything like that are, some people say, oh, well, they're stupid or they don't know what they're talking about. Sometimes when you look up in the night sky and you see something for the first time, you don't know what it is. So what
Hmm.
else are you supposed to call it? A good example
Yeah,
of this is ice pillars. Have you ever heard of that phenomenon?
I have not.
Basically, it's when columns of ice crystals will form in the night sky, right? And it'll start reflecting ambient light from the ground back to, well, essentially, it reflects the ambient light from the ground, right?
Hmm.
So you get these brilliant white, blue, orange, yellow. I guess it looks like beams of light, and sometimes it extends up into the upper atmosphere, and it almost looks kind of saucer shaped.
Ah,
So
interesting.
yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon. If you can Google some photos of ice pillars, you'll see some pretty amazing things. And yeah, to an untrained eye, to somebody who doesn't have any idea about meteorological events or anything of that sort, yeah, it
Hmm.
would seem very strange.
And is that something that you find really helps in these types of cases, knowing a lot about, meteorology and just various physical um, things of nature, like refraction and all sorts of things along the electromagnetic spectrum, stuff like that?
Absolutely. The
Gotcha.
more you know about the natural world and its processes, the more explanations that you can essentially give.
Hmm.
I'll give you an example. It doesn't have to do with UFOs, so I'm going a bit off topic here.
That's okay. Yeah.
But Darcy and I, we were called into this lady's this lady's home, and she was absolutely convinced that she was under demonic attack.
Hmm.
She couldn't sleep at night. She was getting terrible headaches, feelings of dread, felt like something was watching her. She would wake up in the middle of the night choking. So we went to her home with all of our equipment. We started flipping on all our meters and setting up our cameras, and one of them starts going off. I
Okay.
looked at it. I said, "Oh, you are being attacked by an unseen entity." She goes, "Oh, do we need to call a priest?" "No, you've got a carbon monoxide leak. We need to call the fire department."
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's bad. That's
So,
very dangerous. Yeah.
and it just so happens to turn out that symptoms of acute carbon monoxide poisoning are insomnia, feelings of dread, paranoia, everything that was on her list.
Wow. That's yeah. So it's okay. So definitely, the more you know about the natural world, the better.
Definitely.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. I doubt I'll ever get into the paranormal investigation business, but if I do, now I know what to study, at least to begin with.
Definitely. Yeah, no, like educating yourself on natural phenomenon, especially like even some man-made stuff is, paramount to really understanding the field as best you can.
And I mean, so I actually do have a degree in physics, which is not something you normally, I mean, most people don't have degrees in physics, but at the same time, I haven't done anything with it in like 18 years or so. So I'm definitely rusty.
Well, the laws of physics definitely do come up in the UFO world. I will say that much.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, there's all sorts of things that could cause of someone to think that he sees something that, again, could be perceived as unusual and an unidentified object. Unidentified. What am I talking about? Unidentified object. But at the same time, it's a lot of it can very well be explained, and it's. I mean, to me, physics is just interesting because once you start getting into like the quantum realm, it I always feel
Everything
like
just becomes chaotic and harder to understand.
yeah, it's there's really some cool stuff, quantum teleportation, all that thing,
Quantum entanglement
quantum
and
entanglements. Yeah, of course. I mean, there's just it's so interesting to me, but at the same time, I'd rather just play some music and work at a Christmas store. So I think I'm okay.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think I got the better end of the deal there. But we're here to talk about not quantum objects that we don't understand, like quarks, but we're going to actually talk about some other objects we don't understand, perhaps UFOs. And so Rendlesham Forest, actually about 5.8 square miles of there's plantations, there's broadleaf belts, heathland, wetland areas, and it's actually located in Suffolk, which is about 8 miles east of Ipswich, there in England. Now it's kind of in the middle of two Air Force bases that the U.S. was not in control of, but I'd say kind of renting, I suppose you'd say, Bentwaters and Woodbridge. So that's kind of where our story takes place here. And I'm not a very good storyteller when it comes to these things. I prefer to tell my stories in song and in poetry. So I'm kind of doing the best I can here. So if I get anything wrong, feel free to correct me or set the mood a little bit better, because I'm more, as I mentioned earlier off off recording, I'm more of a conversationalist.
I'm not the greatest storyteller either. I just, whenever I'm telling a story, I tend to put some creepy music in the background. That tends to set the ambience real nice.
It really does, yeah.
That does about 3/4 of the work.
Well, you know what? Then I'm totally doing that for sure.
All right.
But our story takes place on December 26th. So I guess you guys would call it Boxing Day.
Yep.
Yep, I know it is the Feast of Saint Stephen, and it's kind of around 3 a.m. And Airman First Class John Burroughs was on security patrol there at Woodbridge Air Base with his partner when they saw some sort of odd light phenomenon in Rendlesham Forest. So from there, and Rendlesham Forest, like I said, it kind of separates the Woodbridge, where they were at, from Bentwaters, which is another air base that the U.S. Air Force was occupying. So they went back to call one of their, I guess you'd say superior. I would say boss, but I guess they're superior.
The commanding officer.
Commanding officer, yeah, that works too. And they still could see it from, I guess, their vantage point of when they were calling. And I guess at the same time, there was another security patrol that kind of arrived and saw the same phenomenon. So from there, they went on to investigate. And I guess they had to leave their weapons just because they were leaving American jurisdiction, or I don't know if that's technically considered American soil, like an embassy, or not. But
I don't think so, because they were operating under NATO at the time. So it would more or less be an alliance territory. In which case, if you were to leave the base, then yeah, you would have to leave your weapons behind.
Okay. And
so that there's no friendly fire incident, because you're not in an active war zone either.
Right. Yeah. So that definitely makes a lot of sense there. See, now we're getting into, I'm definitely in over my head on this one here. I can talk about Rankin Bass all day long, but this is some new territory and I'm really excited about it. But as they started going into the forest, they were hearing some strange sounds and that they thought were farm animals that were very upset. And I mean, to me, that's pretty creepy.
Yeah, and I mean, it's down in Suffolk, so you know that all of those animals are sheep. And to hear sheep freaking out, that's definitely going to set you on edge.
It would definitely set me on edge for sure. Especially because I'm not used to being around sheep. We have a lot of turkeys and javelina, and that's about it over down here, you know? So sheep, just hearing a sheep bleat, I think would kind of just put me a little bit on edge. But as they walked further into the forest, they could hear this. They started receiving radio transmission that an object had been seen over the base and then disappeared. So they kind of started searching around, and I suppose they saw a bunch of strobing lights, at least according to their statement. Now, the commanding officer at the time was Colonel Charles Halt, who even wrote a statement after he investigated it. And of course, through the Freedom of Information Act, it was released. And so there's transcripts out there. You can actually listen to the recordings. And I'll
It was actually a UFO group that came out and petitioned the government to release the Halt memo. Did you know that?
I did not know it was a UFO group. I just knew that it was a layman, I suppose.
Yeah, it was the United States. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it was a group against UFO secrecy in the United States. They petitioned the government and got a ridiculous number of signatures to have this Halt memo released. And it was much to the chagrin of them all because it was just a one-page, I guess, incident report. So,
right.
Yeah, no, when the Halt memo came out, it was a bit of a disappointment to most people because they were expecting a lot more, and all they got was this one-page, I guess, incident report that was 3 paragraphs long. Makes for a really digestible read, though.
Mm-hmm. It's really nice and succinct, for sure. But also, I think they also, when everything was released, they found that there really wasn't any real investigation into anything as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of upset some of them, or at least I'd be upset if I thought it was this big thing and it turns out no one really looked into it. I'm sure I'd be very upset.
Yeah, I think part of that too, though, was some of the, I guess, the attitudes around both Air Force bases in regards to UFO activity and whatnot. Because when it was first reported, the commanding officers were said to roll their eyes and just basically tell their men, stop getting distracted and keep doing your damn work. Keep your eyes on the prize and stop looking at aliens.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't blame them. If someone told me they saw an alien, I'd probably roll my eyes too and tell them to get back to work.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we have wreaths to make, guys. Come on, make your wreaths. But I know that eventually when they were out there for about 2 hours, they were looking at these lights that kept moving around. And I think it was the motion of the lights that really got them a little suspicious about what was going on there. They eventually went out again and investigated and found various markings all over, which I know nothing about UFOs, but I've heard of crop circles.
Mm-hmm.
But reading this transcript and as they're going and they find these different markings, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's like one of those crop circle type of formations.
No, according to the Halt memo, these essentially what these were indentations in the frozen ground that went down about 1.5 inches.
Mm-hmm.
They were about 7 inches across, and they were almost triangular in shape. It's especially strange because the ground was frozen there at the time.
Right.
And I guess I'm jumping ahead here a little bit.
That's okay.
For that, but
no, that's okay.
There was an official investigation into it afterward, but they came forward and said that these were rabbit burrows. Well, rabbits can't burrow in frozen ground, and for that matter, when they don't burrow just 1.5 inches into the ground.
Right. Because that doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, that explanation kind of falls flat on me.
That's really interesting. Why would they pick, out of all things, rabbit burrows?
Probably because, rabbits and foxes are 2 of the burrowing animals that are native to that region. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense if it's too small to be a fox burrow, then we could just pin it on the rabbits. But that's no ordinary rabbit.
What do they say? The fangs or something like that.
Look at the bones.
That's what it is. Look at the bones. I haven't seen that in forever. Now I want to go back and watch it.
Just talking about rabbits, it popped into my head. I had to do it. I can't help myself sometimes.
It's a great movie. I just haven't seen it since college, I think. Yeah. So this is just, there's a lot of strange things. The lights that they said that, I think one of them saw with the reddish hue. I think that's when Halt was out there in his recording. He saw the red lights and they kept moving. And I think that's why he's really sticking to his guns about it being some sort of UFO, and not as and again, I'm jumping ahead, not just lights from the lighthouse that was kind of off in that sight path there.
Yeah, we'll stick a pin in the lighthouse because I've got some opinions on that myself. So,
ooh, I can't wait for that. But every time it seems like they'd get close to the lights, they'd kind of fly away. I'd reported that they would move up and down as well. But the government kind of course, just brushed it off. And like you said, the commanding officers were just like, yeah, okay, whatever. Later, so a few hours after the sighting, then the patrolman reported it to his post commander. And so he said they should try and locate any physical evidence, because I think initially they believed it might have been like a down aircraft, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was when Jim Peniston was the one that was in charge of the investigation as far as this thing went. So,
gotcha. And so, they wanted to go find any kind of evidence for it. So that's when they found the impressions on the ground. They found burn marks on the trees. And I guess they went to the area to kind of see what else was there. And the officer that was with him just kind of dismissed it, like you said, as the rabbit burrows. But I guess the circles measured that were left in the ground measured an equal distance apart and made a perfect equilateral triangle, like not just a triangle, a perfect equilateral triangle, which that I think is very interesting, because if I saw an equilateral triangle in the ground, my first thought would not be any kind of burrowing animal. I don't care how common they were in the area. They don't make perfect triangles in the ground.
Yeah, and another thing too is that, like, as far as the indentations in the ground went, when you actually look up the photos that were taken by the British Ministry of Defense, or I guess it was the police later on that came on with cameras to take photos of the site itself. But anyway, when you take a look at the photos themselves, it's actually not necessarily circular. These indentations, they almost kind of look like a fat version of the Star Trek logo.
Oh, okay.
Or the Federation logo, I guess I should say.
Nice.
It's definitely an interesting kind of indentation, and again, it does not really point toward animal burrows because those are kind of oval in shape.
Well, it's just maybe it's true. Maybe first contact was true, and they came back to our time. I don't know. If you ever watch Star Trek First Contact, I don't know.
I'm not much of a Trekkie, to be honest.
Oh, I gotcha. That's okay.
I was a big Star Wars kid until the Attack of the Clones came out, and then I felt betrayed and turned my back on Lucas forever.
I understand completely. I'm actually both. I say, why not both? I like both Star Trek and Star Wars myself, but
yeah.
Star Trek is one of those where like every other movie is pretty good. And so First Contact was just one of those where the Borg come to attack and they go back in time. So then the Enterprise has to follow them back in time to prevent the Borg from taking over. So of course, on the way, they help Zephyr Cochrane make first contact with the Vulcans, and then the Federation's formed. Anyway, it really has no bearing here. Just, you said fat Star Trek logo, and it reminded me of that. So
well, really, when we're done here, go and take a look at those photos for yourself and tell me I'm wrong.
Oh, I believe it. I believe you completely. But I don't know. I see things like this. I hear things like that. And it definitely sounds like something was there and not just animals.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what. I'm not going to say what yet. So Colonel Charles Halt arrived at the Woodbridge, and he was told about the sightings. So, of course, he was skeptical, just like you and I would be.
And from some accounts, he was pissed.
Well, I mean, it sounds like they were just wasting time in the forest, honestly. So I don't blame him. That was
exactly what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
That they were doing, like, quit wasting time. There's sensitive materials at these bases, which we'll touch on later.
Ooh, I'm so intrigued. I should have just had you tell the story, because I think I'm doing a terrible job here.
Oh no, you're doing great.
I just feel like I'm the host. I guess I should be telling the story, but man, next time you come on when we talk like the chupacabra or something, I'm just gonna let you go with it.
Alrighty.
But yeah, so he started looking at some of the material, and he really just couldn't explain any of it, and so more lights were spotted, and So floodlights were ordered to be set up throughout the woods at, I guess, 9:30 p.m. So I suppose this is on the night that they went out, which I believe was the 28th now.
Mm-hmm.
Colonel Halt received word again he received word of floodlight malfunction, and so he decided to go out and investigate, and he had the photographer come with him. But I believe at this point he still was trying to just prove that nothing happened unusual.
Yeah, you betcha.
But I guess not just floodlights, but some of their other technical equipment was malfunctioning as well. So this is where we get the famous recording. And so he basically, I don't know if it was a tape recorder or what, but he just had like a little recorder, and he was recording the entire thing as they were going. And they went out to explore. I believe Sergeant Robert Ball was with him. They also had like a mini radiation
Geiger counter,
and they were just taking readings as they were going as well. And so they went to the site where they believed the quote unquote UFO had landed. That's when they noticed the red glowing lights, and he says they moved up and down, that they were very sporadic and not really in the same kind of in a zigzagging pattern around the pine trees. And he even says that it's as if they were winking at him, which I found to be quite humorous as well. But so they went to the farmhouse. They started hearing the animals going crazy, although I believe later on it was determined that there were no farm animals at the farm.
Yeah, it was all just crops and whatnot, like corn and wheat and things like that. But there were no actual animals at that farm. Later on, Halt would come out to say that he was pretty sure at that point that it was the animals in the forest that were losing their minds.
And there's a particular type of deer that is in the forest that, when frightened, makes like a wailing kind of sound.
Yeah, red deers.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I don't really know much about deer.
Yeah, foxes too. When they get scared, they let out this thing called an alarm bark.
Okay.
And I kid you not, it sounds just like a woman being murdered. It is a terrifying sound to hear out in the woods at night.
So I guess we do know what the fox says.
Yeah.
Yeah, that song. My kids have lately, as I've been driving them to school, so I do a thing where Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I pick the songs, and then on Tuesday and Thursday, I let them pick the songs. And these last couple of weeks, they've been wanting to hear that song, "What Do the Fox Say?" And so I guess we know, and that's terrifying.
It's funny because my son's name is Fox.
Oh, okay.
So I put that song on, and he just gives me a glare.
Yep. Which is kind of the opposite of what my daughter does when I put the song Cecilia on, because that's her name. So she's like, "Yeah, my song." So they started following the lights, and I guess at this point they were heading more towards the coast. And as they saw the objects in the sky, it kind of had it started moving in strange patterns, and so they thought that they were either trying to communicate with them or warn them or something. But I know at least one of them believed it looked kind of like a grid search kind of thing. I mean, to me, it's fascinating because I don't know if I would really try to, or I don't know if I'd be able to try to figure out exactly what these things were. Like if I were there and I saw them, I don't know if I would just be mesmerized by what I was seeing, or if I would be so curious that I would just go forward. And so whenever someone investigates something like this, and I know that they were in a group, and I know that, they're under orders and, things like that, but it just, I always think of what I would do in that situation. And to me, as curious as I would be, I think if I just saw something like that, I'd probably just stand still and watch it for a while.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to what kind of fight or flight or freeze response that you have when you encounter something that might endanger you. For example, like myself and Darcy, we used to be, how we met, actually, we were security officers.
Oh, nice.
So when danger would come around, we would immediately go into fight mode because that's what we're trained to do. And that translates really well into being paranormal investigators, because then if something weird happens, like a UFO shows up or an apparition pops up, we move toward it, not away from it.
Right.
So I think when it comes to, I guess, encountering anything paranormal, it comes down to exactly like what your personal response to things like that is. Like you get your fight, like Darcy and I, flight, which means you run away, and then freeze,
Right.
which kind of sounds like what you would do is like stand there and observe.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a people watcher in general, so I like to see what people do. So if I saw something, I probably would just kind of stand there and just look at it for a while and try to figure out what it is. But I don't know if I'd run towards it. So that you can and that you actually do these investigations. I mean, kudos to you. That's pretty cool. I don't know if I could do that. Maybe if I was trained as security, I might, but at the moment, no, definitely not.
It takes us a special kind of crazy to do what we do. So
I mean, you asked me to like get in front of like thousands of people and play a song. I'll do that. That's no big deal. But if I think I'm in danger, I don't know if I'd do that.
hmm.
But so they started seeing those lights. It looked like beams were shooting out of them, and I believe even at the base, people were reporting that they could see the lights as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so they reportedly saw several blue transparent lights in the sky, and one seemed to even like dive towards the base as well. One looked like it went through a truck and then went back into the sky, and that was reported by John Burroughs on base. But at
Mm-hmm.
that same moment, Colonel Halt and his men noticed an object in the sky as well that looked like it was coming towards them with just a crazy fast speed, and then it disappeared. And so from there, Colonel Halt was like, that was it. That was his turning point. He was a believer at that point. And I think it's really because he just couldn't explain the various random acts and motions of these lights.
Yeah, because when you listen to the Halt tapes, like the ones that I sent to you there,
Mm-hmm.
you can tell at the very beginning he's annoyed. He doesn't
Yeah.
want to be there.
Yeah.
He thinks, "Oh, this is foolish." And as the events progress, you can hear him getting, what is that? That's kind of weird. And then he becomes panicked. And at the end
Mm-hmm.
of it, he's just in awe of what he's witnessing. So it's kind of amazing that you get to look at that transformation happening, not in real time, but about as close as you're ever going to get.
Right. The whole tape is about 18 minutes long, something like that. Yeah. And it's a cool little listen. So I'm going to put a link to it, of course. And so anyone that wants to listen to it, I definitely encourage you to do so. There's definitely some, like you mentioned, you can hear his progression from skeptic to maybe not like pure believer, but definitely on the cusp of like, hey, something happened here, and I don't know what it is, so I'm not going to rule out UFO at all.
Mm.
Of course, the tape was played to his immediate supervisors, and British military was brought in, but again, nothing really went from there. Some believe, and this is kind of where a lot of the theories pop up. Some believe that it was actually from the lighthouse, because it turns out as they were walking towards the coast, there's a lighthouse there. I believe it's like Orfordness. I don't know if that's how you say it, but
something along those lines.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm used to names like Garcia and Salinas and things like that. So that's, some of these. And then, of course, some of the way British names are pronounced a lot of times is not quite how you think they'd be pronounced.
Yeah. No, I hear you there.
Yeah. But there's a lighthouse there. And so some believe that that's what they were seeing. And that actually sounds plausible to me. There's a lot of various light effects that can happen with atmospheric conditions.
It is possible, but I have a problem with the light. I have a couple of problems with the lighthouse theory, to be honest. Because when you look at the witness testimonies from what happened that night, they said that they saw different colored lights like blue, white, red, orange, right?
Right.
As far as lighthouses go, especially like those in England and whatnot, it's usually just white light. Now, white light, of course, encompasses the entire light spectrum, and if you break it up in a prism, you can get all those colors. However, the lighthouse in question was it was northeast of the base, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. Here's the thing with the Orford Ness Lighthouse is that it has a light blocking shield on its southwest end. So when the
Mm.
light is facing inland, like when
Uh-huh.
light is spinning in the lighthouse, when it's spinning inland, there's actually a shield that blocks the light from being cast out into that direction. And that was installed in 1971, 9 years prior
To
to
the
this
incident.
event.
Hmm.
So they're seeing a lighthouse, but they can't possibly be seeing the lighthouse.
Because it would be prevented. So that okay, so if it's not the lighthouse, well, first of all, is that the only real obstacle to the lighthouse being the culprit, I suppose?
Well, I guess distance might play a part in it too, because it's 5 miles away from the site that this thing was supposedly sighted at.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, so if it's not the lighthouse, what else could it be?
As far as physical phenomenon,
Hmm.
it's really hard to say with this one because what other natural phenomenon can say leave those imprints in the ground? Or there
Right.
was readings of radiation in the area.
There were.
There's broken tree branches that were 25, 50 feet up, and they were also burned.
Hmm.
So, I mean, like, it's one of those things, like, Rendlesham has lived on infamously as one of these great unsolved UFO cases for a reason, and that's because it doesn't really seem like there's any kind of natural or man made phenomenon that really fits all of the criteria needed to really, I guess, act, create a plausible solution to what happened that night.
Right. I know one theory is that so I guess there was kind of a little prank that the US Air Force played on the some of the British troops at one point. And so one theory is that this was them getting back at them, trying to create like a sense of, haha, these dumb Americans believe anything. And so they're actually parachuted down and did various shenanigans to to make them believe that a UFO actually landed. But I mean that just seems kind of odd to me as well. I don't know if I'd believe they would go that to those lengths to actually prank the US Air Force.
It seems like a tremendous waste of military funding and resources to be doing that kind of thing. Like, I did hear one
Yes.
theory
Uh-huh.
that there was a guy that. Oh, I guess it wasn't necessarily a theory. This guy came out and said I was a member in the water bend.
Bentwaters
Oh,
is, yeah.
Bentwater. Okay,
Mhm.
said that he was a soldier in the Bentwater location. He said one of the things that he would do to scare
Mhm.
soldiers was take his car out and put colored screens on both the headlights and taillights and drive around all over the place to incite basically like weird sightings, right?
Okay. Well, that's definitely sounds more plausible than people, parachuting in and just
Yeah, but who goes driving their car out in the woods?
well, see again, I really don't know because I don't have woods around here. So to me that's I don't know, maybe they can drive in the woods.
I don't
I
know
only know
if they're anything like the woods that I grew up playing in when I was a kid. There's no
uh
chance you're fitting a car in there. Not even a motorcycle in some places. That
Oh
stuff's
wow.
thick.
Okay. Well then, I mean that doesn't really seem plausible at all either.
Yeah, like I don't know what the geography of the area is. I'm sure that there's a couple of YouTube videos out there showing people walking those trails or walking through Rendlesham Forest. It might be able to tell us, but
Yeah, I'm
I don't
sure
know.
there's probably tons of that kind of stuff around.
Hmm. But again, it comes down to those broken branches and the burn marks high up in the tree.
Yeah.
Doesn't really necessarily explain that. Also, too, with a little bit going back a little bit to the first investigation with James Peniston,
Mm-hmm.
he said that he saw a craft that was on the ground. It then lifted up off of the ground and shot off at impossible speeds.
Hmm.
There's a couple of things that I have against Peniston. I don't really necessarily believe a lot of what he says.
Gotcha.
Is yeah, he was there. We can confirm that. We can confirm that with documentation that he was there that night.
Right.
he was part of a squad. Like he was a squad leader, and he was the one who was initially sent out during the first sightings of this craft. And yeah, he saw this thing, and his guys backed him up. But then, of course, he had some really, really weird claims just a decade ago that, in my mind, kind of threw all of his credibility in the
Oh
dumpster.
no. Oh, could it be he's just getting older and losing his mind?
Either that, or he's looking to profiteer off of something weird that happened to him.
Yeah, well, I mean, I both are pretty believable, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like,
Huh.
yeah, the guy does have medical issues, so that kind of gives him motive to sort of make things up.
So it doesn't really seem like there's a good logical explanation for what for the possibilities of what could have caused this, at least as far as just natural physical phenomena go.
Hmm.
So in that instance, and I know it's unsolved, but I mean, Occam's razor, it seems like the simplest solution is usually, the correct one. It
Yep.
would be perhaps there really was a UFO in this case.
Yeah, it was either that or an insanely elaborate hoax that to this
Insanely
day,
elaborate, yeah.
yeah, to this day, they still can't figure out how it was done.
Which, I mean, with all the technology and stuff we have now, that just seems very unlikely.
Yeah, extremely unlikely, especially like even back from 1980.
Right.
It's yeah, practical effects were good back then, but not quite that good.
I'd say they were good for movies. I don't know about for actual real life events.
Yeah, not only
But
that, but you're trying to convince, military top brass and stuff like that. Another point about this whole incident, one thing that I found especially interesting, because I keep running into this theme again and again and again as far as UFO cases go,
uh-huh.
and that's the topic of nuclear weapons.
That is very interesting because there were radiation readings, on their Geiger counter. So
Hmm. Now, it's never been truly like the British government has never come out and said that, yeah, we had nuclear weapons at those facilities.
right,
But many, many, many of the guys that came out of there said, yeah, we were paid to look after nuclear weapons.
it makes a lot of sense. It really does. There was like the height of the Cold War. There was kind of an arms race. I mean, I'd believe it. I really would, and I wouldn't doubt it if perhaps some. I mean, I know there's even a theory about that it was like a Russian spy satellite that kind of landed or took off or whatever.
It was actually in with both those theories.
Uh
The
huh.
Russian satellite that came through,
Uh huh.
that has been confirmed to have happened on the night in question. And then, like in an unreal coincidence, the next night a bullseye meteor shot through the upper atmosphere, creating a line of like a great big fireball over Western Europe. It's unclear as to whether it was seen over Rendlesham, but those things did happen.
But could a down Soviet satellite make those marks in that particular way? I mean, I think if it was a crashed satellite, I don't think it would have just made perfectly, equilateral triangle indentations on the ground.
No, it would have taken out about a good, third of a mile of forest before hitting the ground, and it would have hit the ground with an explosion. So,
Exactly. That doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, to me, that's not very plausible either.
mhm.
Even if the forest were to have slowed it enough that it wouldn't have exploded on impact, there's just no way that it would have landed in such a way to make a perfect triangle. I
Yeah,
just,
certainly not.
yeah. Huh. I don't know, man. More and more, it seems like it could be a UFO.
Yeah, I gotta say, unless somebody has a better explanation out there, I have to mark this one as unidentified, unexplained.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. Of course, nowadays you can actually walk the Rendlesham Forest Trail. They've created the UFO Trail. Uh, they did that in 2005, and in 2014, the Forestry Service commissioned an artist to create a work there at the end of the trail, and it states that the piece is modeled on sketches of the purported UFOs seen at Rendlesham. So
Hmm.
it's definitely a tourist attraction now. And if I'm ever in that area, I think I'm totally going to hit it up.
Oh, definitely.
But I mean, you're in this business, so this is like normal for you. But if you heard that there was some sort of UFO sighting, like that night of Christmas, would you rush out to see it or?
Probably not on Christmas because I've got two kids, but
Yeah.
I have been known one of these cases that came up, the one that I was telling you about the ice pillars,
Uh-huh.
that happened New Year's Eve night.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I grabbed my gear and I took off. It's like, I'm going to start the new year by finding aliens? Yes.
Let's do it. Tell you what, though, people would always remember your name. That's for sure.
Yep, that is true.
um, that's actually pretty cool. But it does make me wonder. So normally I ask like, what's your happiest memory or moment about this, the subject that we're talking about. I don't know if that really applies here. So instead, I'm going to do a segment called "This Is It, Don't Get Scared Now." And so, what would be your creepiest or most unusual aspect of this case that you think of when you think of Rendlesham Forest?
Uh, I think the scariest part about this whole thing,
Yeah.
I probably have to say the YouTube ads that I had to endure while brushing up on this subject. Oh my God. Gaia TV is a cancer upon the brain.
That's a good one, actually. Yeah.
Genuinely, though, I think the creepiest part about this,
Yeah.
although I bring it into question, I want to say his name is Larry Warren.
Uh-huh.
He was another soldier that was based out of the Rendlesham area,
Mm-hmm.
and he is the only one that's come forward saying that he actually saw extraterrestrial beings.
Really?
Yeah, he said that they were about 4 feet tall, translucent, like almost transparent,
Hmm.
but they looked just like humans, only 4 feet tall, and kind of this like had a kind of translucent skin.
Ooh, that's
That's the
interesting.
that's the creepiest part to me.
That's pretty creepy. How does that compare then with the other descriptions of extraterrestrials?
It's
Usually you think of them with the bigger head and the big eyes and
Yeah, it sounds kind of similar to how Betty and Barney Hill described their captors because they also looked very human and very translucent skin. About the same height, too. The only difference was, I guess, Williams there, he didn't go into description as to what these things were wearing.
okay.
Whereas Betty and Barney Hill, they were very adamant that these things were wearing like blue overalls. So,
Blue overalls. Very alien right there.
mhm.
They were on their way to Wally World and they just got lost. Uh, but
Can you imagine? Can you imagine if extraterrestrials just came down and they stepped out of their craft and they were just wearing blue overalls, a straw hat, going, "Well, boys, we finally made
it sounds like an episode of The Simpsons or something.
it."
Kang and Kodos just wearing overalls. Yeah.
Aliens are from Arkansas?
Well, but yeah, I think for me, the creepiest thing, and again, it's just because I'm not used to it. And I've heard a lot of creepy animal sounds, but when they started talking about the red deer and
Mm.
or perhaps like you mentioned the fox that sounds like it's a woman being murdered, I mean, to me that's just the creepiest part, walking through the forest at seeing various orbs and then all of a sudden hearing these noises of animals going crazy. I mean, I've seen enough horror movies to know that when animals go crazy you better run. So I think that's the creepiest part to me.
Yeah, there is one theory that might actually explain that is that animals have a much greater hearing range than humans do.
Yes.
And some people believe that these UFOs, they work almost off of what's called infrasound,
Hmm.
or some aspect of their mechanical being is based on infrasound. So they're essentially, part of their mechanics is emitting this either extremely high pitched or extremely low pitched frequency that only animals can hear.
Right.
So that's why they go crazy when these things are around.
Ooh. Well, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's plausible if nothing else.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you think about dog whistles and what it does, to them. So, I mean, I wouldn't, discount it offhand.
Mhm.
But that's wow. Yeah. Okay. Now I wonder what kind of music the aliens listen to. That's for another story.
Yeah, I
So
don't know,
Nor
man.
I wonder if they have, like prog rock. I just
I
picture
just
aliens.
had the cantina theme from Star Wars jump into my head.
Nice. Or the Max Rebo band as well.
Ah, yeah.
There we go. But now we come to my favorite part of the show, and we're still going to do it, even though I don't know if it really makes sense to do it. But it's a little segment I like to call "Gag Me with the Spoon." So this is where we do our best impression of our least favorite part of, in this case, the tape that we heard. So the scene is it's going to be the same scene. It's the Halt and his men just searching and exploring, and it's all based on that audio tape. And I kind of feel bad because this is real events and real people that experienced it, but at the same time, I really like this bit, so I kind of want to do this bit. But as a guest, I'll let you go first. Just what did you find to be the I guess the most annoying, or just your least favorite part of this whole tape?
Like as far as Halt goes, I think toward the end of it though,
Hmm.
his use of the word weird and just the way that he says it, it's so nasally, right? It's almost like
Yeah.
something weird is going on here. It's weird. It's like, okay, we get it. Stop saying that, please. So strange and weird.
That's kind of very similar to what I picked as well. And it's when he's like, "This is unreal," and then he kind of laughs. I can't do his laugh. I,
It's like, how do you command your men with that voice? How do they
I
take you seriously?
I think at that point it's literally just the uniform.
I think so.
Oh man.
That guy with the squeaky voice, you gotta look out. He's crazy, man. I once saw him take out a whole platoon of men with a spoon.
Why a spoon, cousin? Sorry, we're talking about England. I had to pull in a Robin Hood quote there.
Oh, wonderful.
What does he say? Because it's dull, you twit. It'll hurt more. Anyway, uh, that's neither here nor there. But it does make me wonder. GI Joe taught us that knowing is half the battle. What do you think the other half is?
Oh, if anybody who's ever listened to my podcast, you'll know the other half of the battle is don't trust raccoons because they're aliens.
For real,
Or,
those guys are weird.
well, I mean, really, when you think about it, they're 3 feet tall, they're gray in color, big black eyes, weird hands. Kind of seems like a dead ringer to me.
That's right now. It's hitting every single box there.
Uh,
That's pretty good for me. So if knowing is half the battle, the other half is making sure that you're not looking in the direction of a lighthouse before jumping straight to UFO.
that's a good one too.
Yeah, yeah. But hey, it's been so much fun talking with you, Kelly. Tell me about your show.
So my show, I guess our show, Darcy and I, it's called Canadian Spirit. Like we discussed at the beginning, Darcy and I were paranormal investigators. We've been working together for 10 years now, and we decided one day want to keep our investigation skills sharp. And how are we going to do that? Well, we kind of sat down, we got thinking about it. Well, why don't we look at different paranormal cases from across Canada?
Nice.
We were, yeah, that's a great idea. Well, I was huge into podcasts at the time, and a light bulb just kind of went off my head, and I said, why don't we make that a podcast? So, yeah, Canadian Spirit was born, and that's basically what the entire show is Darcy and I looking at paranormal cases from across Canada and just trying to figure out what may actually be behind them. And we also throw in ridiculous ads for companies that don't exist. So it's a bit of a palate cleanser every now and then.
I understand. I and I'm sorry to interrupt here, but I've been listening to Crime Junkies,
Oh yeah.
and it's just a true crime podcast, and so they really get into it, and then all of a sudden it just like cuts to some commercial, and you're like, oh, okay, it was getting really intense there, so I'm glad this is kind of here, and then we go back to it. So I definitely get that, but the fact that it doesn't exist is actually even better.
Yeah, it kind of came about as the fact that we didn't have any sponsors at all, and we kind of needed a break halfway through the show. We wanted to keep the continuity flowing, and we wanted to start making practice for when we would actually cut to a real ad. And yeah, the first one, people hated it. I got threats, and
oh no.
I decided to double down. I said, nope, we're doing this every episode from now on.
See, I love bits like that. To me, that's gold.
But yeah, no, going back to the show, it's pretty much just Darcy and I were trying to figure out exactly what could be behind the most famous and forgotten paranormal mysteries in Canada. And we cover some really interesting topics that is not covered in any kind of history books. So it's certainly a deep dive into both Canadian history and our relationship with the paranormal.
That's so cool that you can just, I mean, I guess it's kind of what I'm doing here. It's really just all about a particular area, particular culture. Of course, mine is Christmas based and the 80s, but I mean, I love how you can just take that native, just everything about it, that culture, and explain it, or try to explain, I should say, the unexplainable. And to me, it's so interesting. But where can they find you?
Oh, we're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, Podbay, pretty much everywhere you find podcasts. You just type in Canadian Spirit, Spirits in all capitals, and yeah, we're usually the first thing that pops up. So
nice. Social media?
Yeah, you can find us on Twitter. It's at Spirit_Canadian, or you can check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/SpiritGP.
Right on. Again, thank you for coming on. It's been so much fun talking with you here and just learning about all this case that's kind of like, I guess, the Roswell of Britain.
Yeah, in a sense, except the craft didn't crash. That's the only thing that kind of sets it apart. Canada has our own Roswell, hey?
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's called the Shag Harbor UFO Incident. We actually have a couple episodes on that one.
Oh, yeah. I didn't realize it was...
and back in, I think it was 1967, a UFO crashed into Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia.
Oh.
So, everywhere's got their own Roswell, it seems.
Well, if we're going to storm something, might as well storm Roswell, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Seems maybe easier to access. I don't know why. Or probably, you know what? Probably because of Independence Day. That I guess maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. It's hard to say.
If Independence Day had been made in Canada, maybe they would have used that one. I don't.
It's Independence, eh?
Independence, eh? He'll be here all week, folks.
Great puns.
Yeah. It's nothing like a good pun. But on that note, I'll say thanks again.
Yeah, and thank you for having me on, Jerry.
Yeah, anytime. And of course, I'll include links to all this, guys. Make sure you check them out. It's such a great show. And I'll end it by saying, immediately thereafter, 3 star-like objects were noticed in the sky, and they were checking us out on our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you're feeling like the U.S. Air Force Security Police patrolman searching the forest in the middle of the night, leave us a review on iTunes. Not only does it help us reach more people, but you also get a free sticker. Now, don't forget to check out our merch shop on tpublic.com and our brand new website, courtesy of Tis the Podcast Elf, Tom Crow. Later, dudes.
Hey guys, I'm Darcy, founder of Spirit.
And I'm Kelly, the Chief Technical Officer of Spirit.
Back in 2011, we formed the Supernatural Paranormal Investigations and Research Institute, searching for answers to mysterious things that were happening in our little corner of Canada.
And we haven't stopped searching for those answers ever since. Join us on our podcast, Canadian Spirit, as we dive into all of Canada's most famous and forgotten paranormal mysteries. Examine the evidence and try to figure out what might be behind Canada's ghosts, cryptids, and UFO encounters.
In Canadian Spirit, you'll get a peek behind the curtain and see for yourself what being a paranormal investigator is really like, and learn something about Canadian history, which isn't as boring as it sounds.
Even if it is, we're a pair of chucklefucks, so we'll do our best to make it entertaining.
So come along for the ride and discover for yourself what makes the land of maple and hockey so wonderfully weird.
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, wherever you find your podcasts. And remember,
raccoons are aliens, werewolves are perverts, and ghosts are just downright rude sometimes.